I didn't expect my Saturday morning to feel like a punch to the gut. I was just walking into the little cafe around the corner, the one with the chipped green door and the smell of fresh espresso that always made me feel a tiny bit alive again. I thought I was prepared for a quiet morning with my coffee and my thoughts, but I was dead wrong. The moment I pushed the door open, the familiar tinkle of the bells sounded, and my world paused for a fraction of a second. There she was, my ex, not just in my peripheral vision, but sitting there, laughing at something ridiculous with someone I didn't expect. My heart hit my chest like it wanted to escape, and suddenly the air felt thick, like I had walked into another dimension where nothing was normal anymore. I hadn't seen her in months. Since the divorce, I had avoided places where I might run into her. I thought I was handling everything, my life, my kid, my job, but apparently, life had other plans. And now, she was here, in this cafe, looking effortless and infuriatingly happy. I tried to focus on myself, on breathing slowly, telling myself it's just coffee, just a random encounter. But then, I noticed him, my son's best friend, sitting right across from her. The one kid I had watched grow up alongside my own child, who I'd trusted like family. And they weren't just sitting across from each other. They were leaning in close, whispering, laughing in a way that made my stomach twist. Time slowed. I felt like I was outside my own body, watching this scene unfold like a bad movie. My hands were trembling, not from the cold, but from the strange mix of confusion, anger, and a sharp, almost impossible to place hurt. I could feel every eye in the cafe glued to them, or maybe just in my mind it felt that way. I wanted to turn around and leave. I wanted to convince myself this was nothing, that I was overreacting. But something inside me refused to move. I had to know what was happening. I had to see it with my own eyes. And then she looked up, right at me. Her smile didn't falter. Her eyes held a secret I wasn't ready for. And that's when I realized. I had no idea what was going on, and whatever it was big. Bigger than I could handle in this moment. In this cafe, with people all around, completely unaware of the storm about to hit. I froze, halfway between leaving and confronting, as my chest tightened and my mind raced. One thought kept looping over and over. What the hell is she doing with him? Before I could step closer, or step away, the barista called out my order. And in that brief, impossible second, everything changed. I couldn't yet see exactly what had happened between them, but I knew one thing. My life was about to be thrown completely off balance, and I had no idea how to stop it. I should probably start by explaining how we got here, how my life, which I thought I had neatly sorted after the divorce, suddenly felt like a house of cards. My ex, Claire, and I were together for over a decade, married for 8 of those years. For a long time, I thought I knew her inside out. We had our fights, our silences, the kind that stretched for days, but we also had a son, Jake, and that bond was supposed to keep some things untouchable. Or so I thought. After the divorce, I tried to keep things civil, for Jake's sake. I'd never been one for drama in front of him. He was 12 now, at that awkward stage where everything mattered too much. Friends, school, sports. And then there was Liam, Jake's best friend. They met in kindergarten and had been inseparable ever since. Liam's parents were gone, so in many ways, Jake and I became a second family to him. I trusted Liam almost like a brother to Jake. He was 15, smart, sarcastic, the kind of kid who could make any awkward moment disappear with a joke. He was family, in a sense. I try not to think too much about Claire's life after we split. She moved into a small apartment downtown, worked long hours at a marketing firm, and was happy, at least from the pictures on social media. I told myself I should be happy for her. She deserved to move on, to laugh again, to breathe without the weight of our past dragging her down. But seeing her across the cafe, laughing that way, I realized I hadn't truly processed any of it. Not really. Life had been moving in this weird, quiet rhythm for a few months. Weekdays were a blur of work and school pickups. Weekends were mostly Jake and me, sometimes with Liam tagging along. Simple, safe, predictable. But seeing them together in that cafe, I felt the ground beneath me shift. And the worst part? I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or something real. Claire had never been the type to cross lines. At least, not in the ways I feared. But something about the way she was leaning toward Liam, that laugh, that look, it was too intimate. Too familiar. My stomach twisted, my mind spiraling with questions I didn't want to ask. And yet, I couldn't look away. I tried to reason with myself, like adults do. Maybe they were just talking about school, a project, some stupid joke I couldn't see. Maybe it was nothing. But that nagging feeling, that tiny, insistent whisper in my chest, wouldn't let me rest. It was like a warning, a red flag fluttering in front of my eyes, daring me to ignore it. And now, as I stood there, frozen just inside the cafe doorway, I realized that this moment wasn't just a coincidence. Something had been brewing long before I even knew it. Something I hadn't seen coming. Something that could change everything I thought I knew about my ex, about Liam, about everything. I wanted to move, to leave, to grab Jake and walk out of this scene before it got messy. But I couldn't, because deep down, I knew I had to see what would happen next. And the second my coffee hit the counter, I realized this wasn't just a morning in a cafe. This was the first page of a story I wasn't ready to read, but couldn't put down. I tried to focus on my coffee, telling myself it was just a coincidence. But my eyes kept drifting back to them. Claire was laughing at something Liam said, leaning just a little too close, her hand brushing his on the table. Or maybe I imagined that. My chest tightened every time I looked, a mix of disbelief, anger, and that stubborn, gnawing worry that refused to be silenced. I felt like I was watching a private scene unfold through a glass wall. I knew I should step away, walk out, give myself time to think. But part of me, maybe the part that still cared, maybe the part that feared the truth, couldn't move. I needed to know what was going on. And then Claire's expression changed. Just slightly. Her laugh faded into a smirk, and her eyes flicked around the cafe before landing back on Liam. That subtle shift told me nothing good. My mind raced, jumping to possibilities I didn't want to consider. What were they whispering about? Was she really? Or was this something innocent the first just didn't understand? I could feel a tension building in my chest, like my heartbeat had its own agenda. My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to confront her, to demand an explanation right then and there. But what if I was wrong? What if it really was nothing? That thought was almost worse than the idea that it was something. And then Liam reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. Time seemed to stretch and compress all at once. Every little gesture between them felt amplified, loaded with meaning. I wanted to scream, to run, to tell myself to calm down, but I couldn't. I was rooted to the spot, trapped between fear and disbelief. I watched as Claire leaned in and whispered something I couldn't hear, her lips barely moving. Liam nodded, a small, knowing smile crossing his face. The way they looked at each other, like they shared a secret I wasn't supposed to know, sent a cold wave down my spine. And then, just as I was about to step closer, maybe finally confront her, my phone buzzed. Jake's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated. Should I answer? Should I ignore it? Whatever was happening here, it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about him too. I swallowed hard, heart pounding, as the world around me seemed to blur. And in that moment, one thought hit me harder than anything else. I had no idea what I had just walked into. I didn't move. I couldn't. My coffee sat forgotten in my hand, cooling rapidly, while my mind spun faster than I could keep up with. Every detail in that cafe felt magnified, the soft hum of conversation, the clatter of cups, even the way sunlight fell across Claire's hair. Nothing felt normal anymore. Claire and Liam were still talking, still leaning close. Her hand hadn't moved. My stomach churned with a mix of dread and disbelief. I wanted to convince myself it was innocent, that I was just reading too much into it, but every instinct in me screamed otherwise. My chest ached as thoughts raced through my head. Why him? Why now? How could she do this? I thought about Jake, playing nearby with other kids, completely oblivious to the storm brewing in front of him. My gut twisted at the idea that his best friend, the kid I trusted like a little brother, could be involved in something that would hurt him. My hands shook slightly, gripping the coffee cup as though it could anchor me to reality. Then I noticed the way Claire's laugh had shifted. It wasn't casual anymore. It was deliberate, knowing, almost teasing. And Liam, he leaned closer, speaking softly, words I couldn't catch but whose meaning seemed clear in the way his eyes sparkled. That tiny detail, that small, dangerous intimacy, hit me harder than any punch. I wanted to approach them. I wanted to ask questions, demand answers. But fear rooted me to the spot. Part of me wanted to leave, to retreat before the damage got worse. But another part, a stubborn, unyielding part, needed to see this through. I needed to know exactly what was happening before I could process it, or before it got out of hand. My mind ran through every possibility, each one worse than the last. Was it a joke? A misunderstanding? Or something else entirely? Something that would shatter the fragile balance of my life, Jake's trust, and the way I thought I understood the people closest to me? I glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware of strangers' eyes, the oblivious barista, the hum of normal life carrying on as if nothing was wrong. That normalcy made it worse. It felt like a ticking clock, counting down to a moment I wasn't prepared for. And then, just as I took a cautious step closer, I saw it. A subtle glance between them, a tilt of her head, a flash of recognition in Liam's eyes. Something unspoken passed between them, something I wasn't meant to see. My stomach dropped, and my knees nearly buckled. At that instant, I realized one thing with terrifying clarity. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't harmless. And whatever it was about to hit me, and everyone I loved, harder than I could imagine. I froze, heart hammering, as the air seemed to tighten around me. My phone buzzed again, Jake's name lighting up the screen. I swallowed, barely breathing. One wrong move, one wrong word, and everything could unravel. And then I heard Claire whisper something that made my blood run cold. Words I couldn't understand but didn't need to. Because in that moment, I knew everything was about to change. I stepped closer, barely able to breathe, straining to catch what Claire had just whispered. And then, I saw it. A small, folded note slipped from her sleeve onto the table. Liam picked it up, his eyes flicking over the words, and something inside me broke. It wasn't just a casual meeting. It wasn't innocent. The note had my son's name on it, Jake's name. And worse, it mentioned a secret he'd told Liam just yesterday. A secret I had thought was safe. My heart pounded, my vision blurred. My son's best friend wasn't just involved with Claire. He was part of something that had been happening behind my back, something I had no idea about until this very second. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd imagined. I wanted to scream, to grab the note, to confront them both, but my body froze. The cafe felt like it had vanished, leaving just the three of us in a shrinking space full of secrets. And in that moment, one terrifying thought hit me. Whatever was happening, Jake wasn't safe. Not anymore. I couldn't hold back any longer. Every instinct screamed at me to confront them, to demand answers before I lost my mind. I walked toward the table, hands trembling, my voice barely steady when I finally spoke. Claire, what the hell is going on? Both of them froze. Claire's eyes widened, but not in surprise, more like calculation. Liam's face went pale, and I could see guilt etched into every line of his young face. The cafe around us seemed to vanish, leaving only the three of us and the explosive secret hanging in the air. Claire leaned back slightly, as if weighing how much to reveal. And then she said it, the words that cut straight to the core of everything I thought I knew. It's not what you think, she said softly, but her eyes told a different story. I was just trying to protect him. Protect him? My mind reeled. Protect Jake from what? From whom? Then Liam spoke, voice shaking. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I found out something about Jake, something dangerous. My heart stopped. Dangerous? My son? My mind raced through every possibility, every fear I tried to push away. Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope, handing it to me. I hesitated, fingers brushing over it. Inside were documents, proof that someone at Jake's school had been threatening him. Someone who had manipulated Liam to keep Jake safe, without letting me know. Every second, the story twisted in ways I couldn't have predicted. I exhaled shakily, relief mingling with confusion. The betrayal I had imagined wasn't betrayal at all. It was protection, disguised as secrecy. My heart thudded painfully, emotions whirling. Anger, fear, relief, all tangled together. And just as I was about to process it, Liam whispered, almost too softly to hear, "But there's one thing you still don't know, and it's why we needed you here now." I froze, realization dawning. The story wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I stared at the documents in my hands, my chest heaving as the reality finally sank in. The fear, the tension, the suspicion, it had all been for Jake's safety. Claire and Liam hadn't been hiding something selfish or cruel. They had been trying to shield him from a threat I hadn't even known existed. It was a lot to process. I looked up at Claire, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion behind her calm. The way she'd leaned close, the whispered notes, the secrecy. It hadn't been a betrayal. It had been love, protection, a desperate attempt to keep my son safe without frightening him further. My anger slowly melted into something heavier, relief mixed with a lingering hurt over how little I had trusted her judgment. Liam sat there, looking small and guilty, as if the weight of the secret had been crushing him for weeks. I knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing," I said quietly. "I know you were trying to help him. And I understand now." Claire watched us, her lips softening into a tentative smile. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a bridge, something to rebuild. I realized in that moment that the past didn't have to define us, that mistakes could be untangled, and that love, sometimes messy, sometimes hidden, could still find its way through. We left the cafe together, the air outside crisp and ordinary, but somehow lighter than it had been when I walked in. Jake ran up to us, laughing, completely unaware of the storm that had passed behind the green door. I held him close, promising silently to protect him, to trust a little more, and to never let fear cloud my judgment again. As we walked home, Claire beside me, Liam trailing a few steps behind, I realized something important. Life wasn't about controlling every outcome or predicting every secret. It was about connection, about caring enough to act even when you didn't know the whole story, and about forgiving, not just others, but yourself. But even as relief settled in, a small unease lingered. The documents revealed one thread, yes, but the world was full of secrets, and life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. I squeezed Jake's hand, glanced at Claire, and then at Liam, and whispered to myself, "We survived this, but what comes next? Only time will tell." And with that, the cafe faded behind us, its door closing on the morning's chaos, leaving a memory of fear, revelation, and an uneasy hope that somehow we would be stronger for it.